been looking ahead. They're wondering whether Mr. Berlusconi's departure really is getting a bit closer. And one other figure from the bond market that I didn't mention before is worth mentioning. 24 hours ago, we were worrying a great deal about 10-year Italian borrowing costing more than 7%. Well, I can tell you that figure has dipped below that threshold of 7%. So there is clearly a degree of relief, but I think it would be far too early for anybody to be declaring victory.
Andrew, thank you. My thanks also to Chris Morris there in Brussels. So, much of the talk over the past week has been about how Greece's financial woes have been superseded by Italy's, of course, whose economy is so much larger than any attempt at a bailout, well, cripple Europe. But is it wrong to lump Italy and Greece together in this way? Is Italy really as threatened as Greece and as vulnerable to collapse? Should it be treated as a kind of pariah, kept out of any future tighter Eurozone? Well, joining me to take a look at some of the accusations and indeed stereotypes flying about and to see if there's much truth in them are from Berlin, the German journalist Michael Steininger, and here in the studio with me, the Italian political analyst Marco Colombo. So, Marco, let me come to you first. I mean, are you hurting? Are people sort of saying things about Italy that, that really they shouldn't? Prejudices, stereotypes?
Well, it is a very different picture if you look at it from London, and if you're in Italy. I was in Italy last week at a political conference of the mayor of Florence, who is a very young mayor, and is probably going to run for the leadership in the opposition in the Democratic Party. So there is young people willing to do good things. At the same time, I was in Naples and in Rome, and people seems to live a very decent life. The lifestyle is still very high. It is true what Berlusconi says, restaurants are full. It is true that also 1 out of 4 young Italians is out of work. And the reason for that is because Berlusconi has presented himself as a liberal prime minister, but he's been very conservative. In the 5 years he was in power, from 2001 to 2006, and once again, since 2008, he hasn't changed anything. So,
but isn't that really the problem? Basically, you've got a country, let me paint the prejudice picture, which I'm sure Mikhail will come and help with as well. A country that doesn't pay its debts, that is corrupt, is full of backhanders, even sort of falsifying figures. I mean, this isn't a country that has an ethos to deal with this kind of problem.
It is absolutely true. Berlusconi was not pushed out by the girls, the scandals, the financial misdoing or the bribing. It was pushed out by the euro, by the inspectors from the FMI and IMF and the European Union that are now in Rome checking the books and say, if you don't do something now, we're going to act. And the reason why your colleague just said the spread has gone down is because Berlusconi today, under pressure from the head of state Napolitano, announced Mario Monti is going to be the new prime minister, which is completely unusual that the former prime minister is actually announced who's going to be the new prime minister.
Right.
But that is a sign that he's going to go pretty soon.
Let's see how it's going down in Berlin. Mikhail, come on, give us the view from Berlin about these Italians.
I think there's a real difference how Germans view the Italian problem and the Greek problem, if you want. I always found it amazing that Germans are still very, very much in favor of supporting Greece, giving Greece help financially. I think with Italy, it's a very different picture. And that is, I think, largely due to two things. One is Mr. Berlusconi's personality, and the other thing is the reforms that Germans went through themselves earlier in this decade, when then Chancellor Schröder invented the so-called Agenda 2010, and they brought on salaries and wages and cut all kinds of social networks. So Germans have gone through that, and they have seen Italians have not. Rather, Italians have, that's how Germans see it, have imitated their own prime minister in playing the system, because that's what Germans think he has been doing all along. He has never been brought to court for anything of that, but he has always, so it seems here, played the system and never really played well.
All right, Marco's waving a hand a bit. What's your view?
Well, he has been taken to court several times. He managed to avoid sentencing. Well, actually, he's also been sentenced. He managed to avoid conviction because he was in power. He was completely controlling the parliament. I mean, there's been talks and actually reports and facts that he's been bribing and buying MPs, and he failed. He just failed the other day, and that was the sign. End of the Berlusconi era. A new government is going to step in as soon as possible. Berlusconi made a promise, but now he's been forced to move out.
But what does all this say about your country, Marco?
Yeah, Berlusconi's been voted by 30% of the Italians. 7 out of 10 Italians didn't like Berlusconi in power when he was voted in 2008 and don't like him now. It is a quite interesting picture. I mean, this is interesting time, and it will be studied and remembered. I think Berlusconi impersonified the quintessential Italian, somebody who doesn't really believe the storm is arriving until it hits the front door, and now the storm has arrived and the Italians are bracing together.
All right, Mikhail, is this the kind of country you want to share a Eurozone with?
Well, I was just going to come back to what Marco just said. 7 out of 10 Italians didn't bother voting him out, voting Berlusconi out. That's how Germans see it. Whenever I speak to my friends and colleagues here in Germany, they say, we can't understand why this man has been Prime Minister of Italy for so long. Clearly, there must be a majority for him.
Michael,
not really. Again, he basically passed a law when he was in power last time, and it's a fantastic law. It's called Porcellum, the pig law. He managed to do a law for which he would appoint the MPs, a list, and he would get a majority with only 30% of the votes. It's a democracy. That's the way it works.
Marco, my thanks to you, also to Michael Steiniger there in Berlin. Well, look at the example of Argentina. Now, 10 years ago, it suffered a similar financial crisis.